we had to make those releases. 9.0, as I said, is the most recent release. We did about a couple of weeks ago. And one of the main highlight of 9.0 is the workflows plugin. This was specifically done for the 2 new clients we are working for in Netherlands. In fact, we are right now in Netherlands to meet, have some workshops and meetings with the new clients. They are UMC Utrecht and UMC Amsterdam. And both of these had this particular use case where they are very high throughput biobanks. And the samples they get in, they have specific SOPs for every type of sample that needs to be processed. And these SOPs has to be built into OpenSpecimen, where every step of the processing, they need to enter whether they followed the specific SOP, and if there were deviations or anything different than what is in the template of the SOP, they have to document it. So to make those easier, so we created this plugin called Workflows, which helps in creating different kinds of SOPs and following those specimen processing steps. So and how this can be done is, it is kind of like in a kind of widget where you can do next and go to every task in the workflows in an easy to use navigation. So we look at some example workflows. So first example is when they receive heparin tubes, what are they supposed to do? So every step of the heparin processing is kind of programmed into OpenSpecimen using the workflows module. So now when they receive the heparin tubes, they at the lab, they pool those blood samples. So suppose for example, for every patient, if they receive 2 heparin tubes, they pool those and then they do fecal isolation. If there are more blood than expected or less number of blood, so based on that they decide whether they want to pool specimen again. And finally they'll do a cell count and create PBMC samples. And all these samples are pre-barcoded, so they want to barcode the aliquot tubes finally. So this is just an example processing SOP that I'm going to show. But similar to this, you can create any kind of workflows like tissue processing, serum processing, plasma EDTA tube processing. So every kind of tube or specimen that you receive has a specific set of steps that you need to perform, right? And in the current OpenSpecimen, if you have to do all this, these are all separate steps. Like, you need to receive specimens using a different menu item. Then you need to collect the specimens. Then you need, of course, there is no pooling specimens in the previous version, but we have added this as a feature. So what workflows allows you to do is all this, you can do like a step-by-step procedure that rather than going into different menu items, there are more number of clicks in the older version. So we'll look at this example now. Yeah. So for the workflows module, sorry, let me go to the test server for that. For the workflows module, we have a separate menu item that you see here. And this is our test server. This is right now not on a demo site. We'll add that soon. So here, first let me go here. So as the first step is, as an administrator, I can upload all these workflows. So as you see, there is serum processing, heparin processing, tissue processing. So there are different workflows like this. Now, first thing is, it also shows me how many different batches are going on in each of these workflows. Now let me go inside the heparin processing. So as I said, these are different batches started by different users. Now I'll go to something called as the waiting queue. Yeah. So the waiting queue is created based on the different rules. So let me first select the heparin processing and show it to you. Yeah. So here, if you see, there are some specimens already waiting for heparin processing. So this is done based on different rules that has been set on the the workflow. So I can say that whenever a sample is received in a lab, for a particular protocol or a particular type of tube type or a specimen type, then this has to come in the queue for heparin processing. So you don't really have to even scan the samples. You can, but the system can decide, based on certain parameters of the specimen, that these are, pending for this workflow. So now what I'll do is, okay, I have received these 4 samples today. I'm going to select that and start the workflow. So this is the workflow processing screen. So as a tissue banker, so today I received 4 heparin tubes from patient B29. But of course, you can also do this for multiple patients at a time. So, and as you see, at each step of the workflow, you can define a lot of things. The first thing is you can define what fields you want to enter for each step. Then you can have a description. So if you see, it says that, what points to consider for each of the steps. Then it shows you an overview of the specimens as well. We'll come back to that later. So now I have received all these specimens as per my, whatever I've defined in the template. So I'm just going to submit this. So as I complete each step, you see that there's a green mark over here. So this is kind of on the left-hand side, the overview of all the steps I need to follow for a particular workflow. And for every workflow on the right side, what data I want to enter, that is shown here. So the next step is I need to pool the samples. So I'm going to pool first 2 samples. Then I'm going to pool the second, third and fourth sample. Yeah. So, and if I want to print labels, that is also an option that I have. Then I'll say submit. So now I have finished the second step. So if I want to, exit this at this point, because for fecal isolation, I might be going somewhere else, or maybe some other user in the lab is going to continue this workflow. You can exit this and come back to this batch at any point of time. And now, now I'll see what is the description. So there's no description here. So, and enter the date and time and submit this. So again, I'm going to pool the sample if I want, but at this point I decided that I don't have, I have enough pooled samples, so I'm going to skip this step. So you have an option to skip a particular step. And if you're skipping, it's going to ask you for confirmation, and I need to put a reason. So not enough blood. So I'm just going to submit this. So when you skip a step, if you see there's a cross mark, so it will indicate that this workflow did not happen. And if I now go into the specimens, it will show me the samples that were added. And if I go open that specimen, it will open it in a different tab. Let me show you in the visit for. So if you see here, these are the pooled sample. That's why it's indicated in pink. And these were the samples that I received, the heparin tubes. Yeah, and if I go inside, it will show me all the collected, received, whatever I entered in the as part of the workflow. They're all added at the specimen level. So now the next step is I'm deriving PBMCs and entering the cell counts. So I'm just going to enter some of them here and submit. Then I can create aliquots. So as you see, each task in workflow can be of different types. It can be creation of aliquots, which is like an action. It can be events. It can be form data entry. So you can include any fields, any kind of actions as part of the, every task of this workflow. Now, as the last few steps, so what I'm doing is I'm going to create PBMCs. Then I can scan the barcodes for each of the aliquots if I want. So now if I go inside the specimen, so you remember there were only heparin tubes that were parent samples. Now it has created the derived PBMCs and the aliquots as well. So this is one example of the workflow. As I said, so this holds all the steps that you see here and the data related to these steps, they were all part of the workflow. So you don't have to go to multiple screens, and you can do for this for multiple samples of different patients at once. Before I go into another example, I'll just Yeah, yeah. So I'll just stop for some questions now, because this is one of the big features that we have added. So one of the question is, can multiple users work on the same batch, or can a user resume where a previous user stopped? Yes, you can do that. So you can exit a particular batch at any point of time, and any user who can access that workflow, they can come and resume that particular task. So workflow is can be assigned to a group of users, and any user in that group can continue a batch. So that is how it works. There is another question, can a workflow be how is workflow configured? Yes, it is configured by admins, and you can by default super admins have access to workflows, but when you create users, so let me just quickly show you that. So when you create users, similar to how you have managed forms, you also have managed workflows. So you can give this additionally to other users, so to add new workflows. And yes, it is using JSON files. Can you add custom fields to the pages within each step of the workflows? Yes. So you can add any field of specimen visit, including custom fields. Even custom forms can be added as part of the workflow. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, coming back to the workflow. So the another feature is you can also download like a manifest, and this manifest can be configured the way you need it. Let me just show you an example of it. So this is like a collection manifest where you can have like barcodes of the specimens. You can have a table of overview of the specimen. So something like if you have like an order form for every visit, you can have such manifest also. And this is not just part of workflow. This manifest is now available even on the normal collection pages that you can configure. And the manifest, the format of the manifest can be configured at protocol level. So this was one example. Let me just highlight the features of workflows. As I said, workflows can have multiple tasks. Each task can collect different data, and you can define description per task. Then per task, you can also record deviations, or you can even skip a particular task. And overall, the whole workflow can have an SOP as well. Let me show you an example of that. If I go back to workflows. This has, yeah, so here if you see this particular workflow on the whole workflow has a SOP, and you can also have links. Suppose your internal website or intranet has workflow, the SOP documents, you can link it to that as well. So in general, you can have description for each task like this, or you can have description for the overall workflow as well. And finally, you can print labels, specimen labels in between the workflow, like at every task you can define if you want to print labels, or you can print a manifest for, as I showed to you. So just to give you one more example, so this is a serum processing workflow. So again, you receive specimens at the lab, you rest the blood tube for 60 minutes, spin the tube for 10 minutes at a specific speed, and finally process the aliquots. So let me just show you an example of that. Yeah. Page. Yeah, so here if I go inside one of the serum processing, so here if you see, we can receive the specimens, then rest the specimen for a certain period of time. You can centrifuge it, and finally you can create the serum aliquots and even store them. So when you store the specimens, even you have an option to auto allocate the specimens, and when you want to freeze, you can enter the freeze date and time. So all these, as I said, the steps, the description, the title of the each workflow task, step, everything can be defined as part of the workflow. Yeah. Any other questions on the workflows? Okay, so that was the workflow feature. Um, and as I said, so if you have multiple workflows for a particular protocol, you can define rules so that the specimens automatically get assigned to the workflows. So imagine in your protocol, you're collecting heparin tube and EDTA tube. So there are two different workflows. So you can define saying that if heparin tubes are received in the lab, then they should be automatically assigned to heparin processing workflow. So they appear on the waiting queue automatically, and you also, the users who are assigned to that workflow, they get a daily email notification, um, specifying what got added in the queue today. Yeah. And as I said, you can assign specific tasks within the workflow to users. So sometimes what happens is, you receive heparin tubes, you do some processing in one lab, and then you might be sending for cell count and cell processing in a different lab. So you can assign individual tasks within the workflow to specific user groups. So only those users can log in and resume that particular workflow. They can see waiting list, as I already mentioned. So those were the features, and since this is as part of 9.0, yeah, so whatever the workflow is implemented is the first version, but we are still working on new features and adding new things to that. So that was workflows feature.